interview with Dr. Siyabulela Fobosi about taxi violence. We had problems with connection earlier. You know, the taxi violence we saw in Joburg and Soweto over the last weekend, and what happened in Joburg last week and in the Western Cape for much of the year. Well, Dr. Fobosi, good afternoon to you again. You wrote the thesis about the history of the taxi industry. You suggested perhaps that the starting point of the violence that we see now was maybe as far ago as the 1990s.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for connecting again. Definitely, as I said earlier, I think this problem really started in the early 1990s. You know, when there was deregulation and there was a new entrance of many taxi operators in the industry, and so many people started operating, buying or applying for operating licenses. And buying, their own taxis. So, and there was then a stiff competition, which actually still continues until this day. So there's what I would call a stiff competition. It's not a fair competition between those who have operating licenses and those who do not have. So there's still that context. So there's still a context of many people who said to me, look, we still are waiting, operating licenses, and they are still using what they call receipts.
In the end, it always comes back to routes, and I mean this happens again and again. And routes are managed by the provincial transport MECs, so it's the provinces that have to manage this. Do they manage the routes badly, or is the situation just maybe unmanageable?
Thank you, Stephen. So I think really, not much is being done in that regard. I would put it that way. I think not much is being done because really I think there needs to be very much more provincial intervention in terms of routes of operations of the taxi taxis, taxi operators. So there needs to be traffic, or police, intervention, so that police can monitor what is happening, or in fact, even go to the taxi ranks to look in terms of what is happening. Are the taxi ranks, in good conditions, and are the taxi operators, obeying the rules of the road? So that's where the traffic officials would not also need to come in. So I think more needs to be done, in terms of ensuring that the industry operates as per the rules of South Africa.
I mean, one of the problems, and earlier you spoke about how this started in the 1990s, and in the 1990s was a point at which we had high levels of violence in our society. We have them again, but there was organized violence, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. Now we still have a high number of weapons, the use of hitmen in the taxi industry. This tells you how difficult it's actually going to be to sort of root out this violence. It's become part of how this industry does business, I suppose.
Yes, Stephen. So what is happening? I'm sure you have read, some of the papers that I've written. So what is happening is that there's what they call taxi executives. So in some instances there are disagreements, between some of the people in leadership, in terms of what is going to be done, to implement some of the issues that are happening. So really, I think it really boils down in terms of who's authorized to operate in a particular route and who's not authorized. So there are really deep-seated issues in that regard, and there are still people who hire what is called hitmen in order to kill someone who they are not in agreement with. So I think that is a problem. That is a big problem. So that's where the state, I think, needs to be involved. And that's where also I think the industry leaders themselves, they also need to ensure that they avoid the cases where, commuters are put at risk, their lives are put at risk. So, because, I mean, the industry depends on commuters in order to generate income. So, I mean, it's not good that you have taxi operators, being involved in taxi violence, and because that itself, violates the rights of commuters to use public transport.
In the middle of all of this is the structure of the taxi industry. And how important is that? So it's not taxi companies, it's associations. There are often fights over the leadership of these associations. There's a huge amount of cash involved. And when there's cash involved, sometimes it makes it easier to steal, or there can be arguments about it. Is that part of the problem, the structure? I mean, this is why the Gauteng provincial government wants to formalize the industry.
Yes, Stephen. It's part of the problem. As I said, the problem, is bigger than we can imagine. It's bigger than what is reported. In terms of violence, what is happening. It's much bigger than that. You have the industry that still remains, informal. It's still structurally situated in the informal sector. And the state still finds it difficult to engage, with the industry, especially in a context where you have what I would call two mother bodies. There's Santaco and there's NTA. So I think the state is still finding it difficult, rather, to engage in terms of the representative of the industry, so to deal with the issues of leadership problems. So I understand that as part of the National Taxi Khotla that was held last year, and thanks to the current minister for organizing that together with his department. So as part of the proposals, that were taken, that is to address the legislative problems in the industry, and to make sure that those problems are addressed right away, and also to professionalize the industry, because that still remains the problem, because you still have taxi drivers that still needs to be trained in terms of customer care. So I think those recommendations that were taken at the National Taxi Khotla, I think those still need to be implemented. So they are very good. And I think more can be done if they are very well implemented.
Dr. Siyabulela Fobosi, really appreciate the time. Thanks very much indeed. Senior researcher UNESCO Oliver Tambo, Chair of Human Rights at the Nelson R. Mandela School of Law, at the University of Fort Hare, expert, as you can hear, on the taxi industry.